Welcome, curious minds, to The Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're embarking on, well, a truly quirky linguistic adventure.
Quirky indeed.
We're doing a deep dive into a really specific but a surprisingly rich corner of English. Words that start with "quo."
Mm-hmm.
And these aren't just, random dictionary entries. You just think of them more like little linguistic time capsules.
That's a great way to put it.
Each one holds a surprising story, sometimes revealing fascinating cultural shifts, and often, honestly, unlocking a deeper understanding of how we communicate.
Absolutely.
So get ready to have your mind, and probably your vocabulary too, delightfully expanded.
Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is really to gently pull back the curtain, unravel the intricate stories behind these qual words.
Mhm.
We'll be tracing their, well, often unexpected origins, watching how their meanings have shifted, sometimes subtly, sometimes quite dramatically over centuries,
Right.
and uncovering the really fascinating human narratives woven into them. You're definitely in for some aha moments, I think.
I hope so.
Yeah, as you start to grasp not just what they mean now, but the deeper why. Why they ended up like this, how they came to be used this way.
Makes sense.
And we're going to try and make what might sound like, complex linguistic stuff feel really accessible and, dare I say, pretty engaging.
Absolutely. We're taking that curiosity you, our listeners, bring, combining it with our, well, pretty detailed source material.
Mm,
And together, we're going on an in-depth exploration to reveal the hidden gems, the surprising connections, and just the sheer delight found within these crow words.
Yeah, think of us as guides through the sometimes tangled but always beautiful family trees of language.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Right. Let's kick things off with something that feels, I don't know, wonderfully primal, words that almost seem to mimic the sounds they describe.
Yeah, like language itself is just trying to capture the world around us.
Exactly. And maybe the most immediate example straight out of like the farmyard is quack.
Ah, quack. Perfect starting point. The word quack, as in that distinctive kind of harsh sound a duck makes.
Yeah.
It's a beautifully direct imitation, a prime example of what linguists call onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia, right?
Yeah.
Like buzz or hiss. Exactly, where the word literally sounds like the thing it describes. But what's really interesting here, according to the historical records,
Mhm.
is that the very first recorded use of quack in English was actually as a verb.
Oh, really? So not the noun, the sound, but the action of making the sound.
Precisely, which highlights that immediate sort of visceral connection between the sound and the action. You hear it, you name the action.
Wow.
It speaks to a really fundamental way we describe and interact with our environment, doesn't it? Mirroring sounds directly in our words.
It really does. And it's not just animal sounds, is it? Think about something really basic like drinking. We have the word quaff.
Right, quaff.
When I hear that word, I almost hear the gulping sound, that, vigorous downing of a drink. You're absolutely spot on. Croff pops up in the early 16th century. And it's highly likely to be imitative of the sound made during enthusiastic, maybe even slightly noisy drinking.
Yeah.
It's not just describing the act, it's painting this vivid auditory picture for you. You can almost feel the liquid going down, hear the sound in the throat, just from the word.
It's amazing how descriptive language can be sometimes. Like the word itself is thirsty.
Exactly. It goes beyond just the definition to evoke a whole sensory experience.
So from a hearty gulp to a bird call, we also have quail, the bird.
Ah, yes, the bird.
Does its name also come from its sound? Is it another case of onomatopoeia?
It is actually. The bird's name, quail, came into Middle English from Old French quail,
Quail. Okay.
which itself came from medieval Latin coacula.
Mhm.
And, well, all signs point to that Latin word and the name itself being an imitation of its distinct kind of sharp call.
Interesting.
Now, this is a perfect moment to highlight something really important in linguistics, because we had a common thing here, homonyms.
Ah, right. Words that sound the same but mean different things.
Exactly. And it's crucial here to distinguish this bird, quail, from the verb quail.
As in to quail in fear.
Precisely. To shrink back looks courage. That verb, surprisingly, has an unknown origin.
Really? Unknown.
Yep. It first appeared meaning to waste away, to come to nothing, totally separate from the bird.
Wow. So same sound, same spelling, completely unrelated histories.
Exactly. One's an echo of a sound, the other is about, well, fading away. It's these kinds of splits, these homonyms, that make digging into words so fascinating. Hashtag tag B symbolic imitation in movement.
That's a fantastic point about homonyms. You really can't assume connections just based on sound. But let's shift gears slightly, from direct sound imitation to something maybe more symbolic.
Okay.
Words that evoke a feeling of movement or a sensation through their sound, and for that, I immediately think of quagmire.
Oh, good one. Quagmire.
You say it, and you almost feel stuck, don't you? Like the word itself is sinking.
Precisely. Quagmire enters English in the late 16th century, and it's fascinating because that Q sound seems to carry a symbolic, almost tactile weight.
Tactile, interesting. How so?
Well, the first syllable, quag, is actually an old archaic term for a marshy place.
Quag, never heard that.
No, it's pretty obscure now. But it's related to a dialect verb, quag, meaning shake or shiver.
Okay. Like the ground shaking.
Exactly. Imagine sinking into a marsh. The ground shivers, it gives way. So the theory is that the Q sound isn't directly the sound of the marsh, but it's symbolically linked to that trembling, unstable movement.
So it's like a sonic echo of the unstable ground.
You got it. A soft, sinking, shaky feeling in the word itself. It's like the word shudders. A subtle but really powerful way language reflects the physical world.
That's really clever. The sound mirrors the instability. It makes me think of other words for trembling. What about quiver? As in to tremble.
Yes, quiver. The verb meaning tremble is another superb example of this symbolic link to quick, trembling motion.
Where does that one come from?
It's a Middle English verb,
Mm-hmm.
and it traces back to an Old English adjective, quaifer.
Quaifer. What did that mean?
It meant nimble or quick. Now, quaifer is obsolete, but the Q sound in quiver clearly carries that idea of rapid, slight, maybe involuntary movements.
Right, like shivering.
Exactly. And it lines up with other words like quaver and quick, where that initial sound suggests suddenness or agitation. It evokes the very action it represents, that internal vibration.
And quaver itself, that's another one. It immediately makes me think of a trembling voice, or maybe a musical note vibrating.
It absolutely does. Quaver, a late Middle English verb, first shows up in the general sense of tremble.
Just general trembling.
Yeah. And it's linked to a dialect word, quave, meaning quake, or tremble, which itself is likely related to an Old English word connected to quake.
So there's a whole family of these trembling words.
There is, yeah, a linguistic chain all tied to vibrating or shaking. But what's particularly interesting about quaver is how it got adopted later, mid-16th century, as a musical term.
Ah, the musical note, right.
Exactly. It shows how a word describing a physical movement, a tremor in the voice or hands, can evolve into a specialized technical term, describing oscillation in pitch or volume in music.
It's like a metaphor becoming literal in a technical field.
Precisely. It's a wonderful example.
And that leads us perfectly to the big one, quake, the root of all this trembling.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Quake takes us right back to Old English. The root is quoation,
Quaesation.
which simply meant to tremble. It's the foundation for this whole group of words about shaking or vibrating, whether it's the earth or just a shiver.
And from that very physical meaning, we get something quite different, don't we? The term Quaker.
Ah, yes. The Quakers, members of the Society of Friends.
I know the name, of course, but I never consciously made that Quake connection. What's the story there? It sounds significant.
It is significant, and it's a great illustration of how a physical action can become a defining label for a group. Sometimes playfully, sometimes mockingly, sometimes with pride.
So how did it happen?
Well, there are two main theories. One suggests it comes from the founder, George Fox. Around 1650, he apparently told his followers to tremble at the name of the Lord.
Literally tremble.
That's the idea, a physical manifestation of profound reverence and awe, a sign of spiritual conviction.
Okay, that's one theory. What's the other?
The other theory, maybe more from an outsider's perspective and sometimes used by critics, links it to the physical experiences sometimes called fits that worshipers apparently had during passionate meetings when moved by the Spirit.
Ah, intense physical expressions of faith.
Right. So people exhibiting those movements were labeled Quakers. Whichever theory is more historically accurate, both link the name directly to the physical act of trembling or shaking.
It's a powerful example of how a simple verb can turn into a label with so much social and religious weight.
Absolutely. Capturing a perceived characteristic, whether self-proclaimed or applied by others. It shows language getting deeply intertwined with identity and belief.
Okay, so from sounds and motion, let's pivot now to something that feels, well, much more grounded and maybe surprisingly mathematical.
The number 4?
Exactly. The fascinating family of words that stem from the concept of four. And our gateway into this really prolific group is Quadrangle.
Quadrangle, yes, a word from late Middle English. It beautifully shows off its direct Latin roots.
Latin, okay.
It's basically built from two parts. Quatuor, meaning four,
Right, quatuor.
and angulus, meaning corner or angle.
Well,
It came to us either through Old French or straight from late Latin quadrangulum, which just meant a square thing.
4 corners, 4 angles. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly. And this word perfectly introduces a really powerful and widespread family of prefixes in English. Quadri, quadri, and quadr.
All meaning 4.
Essentially, yes, all stemming directly from quatuor, the Latin for four. Think of quatuor as this linguistic seed,
A potent one.
a very potent one. A whole family of words grew from it, adapting slightly as they passed through different languages, but always carrying that core idea of four.
That's incredible. One Latin root spawning so many prefixes we still use.
It is. You see its influence everywhere, consistently denoting concepts related to four of something, sides, parts, groups, you name it.
So let's unpack some of the technical terms that come directly from this power of 4, like quadrant.
Quadrant, yeah. Also appeared in late Middle English, derived from the Latin quadrans, meaning quarter.
A quarter, okay.
Its evolution is quite illustrative. It started out as a name for a specific astronomical instrument. Quarter circle device for measuring angles, crucial for navigation and astronomy back then.
Right, I can picture that.
But over time, its meaning broadened quite a bit to its current technical use.
Yeah.
Each of 4 equal sections of a circle divided by 2 perpendicular lines, or just, any of the 4 quarters of a circle.
So it went from a specific tool to a general mathematical concept.
Exactly. But still rooted firmly in that idea of a fourth or a quarter. A great example of a word generalizing its meaning.
And then there's quadratic. That word throws me right back to high school algebra.
Huh. Yes, quadratic, a term that became common around the mid-17th century. It came via French or modern Latin quadraticus.
And it's linked to 4.
It stems from the Latin quadrare, meaning to make square or to square. In math, that relates directly to squaring a number, raising it to the power of 2, often visualized as a 4-sided square, or dealing with equations with variables squared.
Ah, the square's 4 sides.
Precisely. The concept of a square is tied to 4 because of its 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. A neat connection between geometry and algebra, all in the word.
Sticking with geometry, quadrilateral is another obvious one, right? 4 sides.
Quadrilateral is very straightforward, yes. Comes from late Latin quadrilaterus, directly meaning 4-sided.
No hidden twists there.
Nope. What you see is what you get. Very efficient, those Latin roots.
It's impressive how consistently 4 pops up. We even use it in everyday measurements, like quart. It's so common we don't even think about the number.
You're right, it's just part of the furniture now. Quart, a Middle English word, traces back through Old French quarte and Latin quarta, pars, meaning fourth part.
Fourth part.
Ultimately from Latin quartus, fourth, which as we said comes from quatuor, 4. So it is literally a unit of capacity designed to be a quarter of a gallon.
The measurement is right there in the name.
Exactly. Ancient numerical systems embedded in our modern units.
And quarter itself must follow the same path.
Absolutely. Quarter, also Middle English, shares the exact same base and journey as quart, via Old French quartier from Latin quartarius, fourth part of a measure.
Another direct descendant.
Yep. Reinforcing how pervasive this root is: time, money, physical divisions, volumes.
And then there's quire, as in a quire of paper. I've heard the term, but always wondered about the number.
Quire, Middle English again.
Yeah.
Fascinating because it refers specifically to a unit originally 4 sheets of paper folded together to make a section of a book or manuscript.
Ah, 4 sheets.
Though later its meaning broadened to 24 or 25 sheets. But the origin is from Old French quaye and Latin quaterni, meaning a set of 4.
Back to quatuor again.
Back to quatuor. It's remarkable how the same root applies to liquid volumes, divisions, and stacks of paper. Shows its versatility and maybe the historical importance of standard units in different trades. Hashtag C. Groups of 4 in life.
Okay, so 4 is clearly foundational in technical terms and measurements, but what about describing groups of 4 in, a more general sense? Or even living things, like quadruped?
Quadruped entered English mid-17th century, a remarkably straightforward example.
Where it's from?
Directly from French quadruped, or Latin quadruped. Quadruped, which literally means 4-footed.
4-footed. Simple.
Exactly. Perfectly describes animals that walk on 4 legs, widely used in zoology. Clear, unambiguous connection to the number 4 through a physical attribute.
And quadruplet obviously fits the pattern of twins, triplets, a
Accurate.
natural extension.
It does, very naturally. Quadruplet, late 18th century word, clearly became part of this prefix group, influenced by the familiar pattern of triplet.
Makes sense.
It derives from the late Middle English verb quadruple, which came via French, from Latin quadruplus. So it's built on an existing linguistic framework for multiples, language building on itself logically.
But in music, 4 musicians make a quartet.
Quartet, yeah. Early 17th century term for a set of 4 musicians, singers, whatever, comes from French quartet or Italian quartetto,
And those come from?
ultimately from quarto, meaning fourth. So, just like the others, the number 4 is right there in its DNA, indicating an organized group of 4. Another testament to those Latin roots in specialized vocabulary. Hashtag tag D4 episodes.
Right. Now let's dive into some really unique places where 4 might be lurking, maybe slightly hidden, or its presence is less obvious. First one that springs to mind, especially recently, is quarantine.
Ah, quarantine.
I know I mean isolation, but where does 4 fit in? It doesn't sound like 4.
It doesn't. But quarantine, which appeared mid-17th century, has a truly fascinating story directly tied to the number 40.
40, not 4.
40. It comes directly from Italian quarantina, literally 40 days, which comes from quaranta, 40.
So why 40 days?
Historically, quarantine was the specific period, 40 days, derived from Latin quadraginta, 40 of isolation imposed, especially on ships and travelers coming from plague-ridden areas. It was meant to test for disease, prevent its spread. A literal 40-day waiting period,
Wow, a fixed 40 days.
believed to be enough time for illness to show. But what's notable is how the word evolved. While the origin is strictly numerical 40, the length of time for quarantine today isn't fixed at 40 days anymore, is it?
No, definitely not. It can be much shorter.
Exactly. It now means any period of isolation to prevent disease. So the word evolved beyond its strict numerical origin. The 40 is still there in the etymology, like a ghost, but not in the modern application.
That's a great example of a word holding onto its history but adapting its practical meaning.
It really is. Practical evolution.
And another unexpected one for me is quarry, but not the stone pit or the hunted animal. The third one, the diamond-shaped pane of glass or tile.
Right. Quarry.
That doesn't immediately scream 4 to me.
You're right, it's not obvious. This quarry, referring to the glass pane or tile, emerged mid-16th century. It's actually an alteration of a Middle English word, quarrel.
Quarrel, like an argument.
No, different quarrel. This one originally meant a lattice window pane, like the small diamond shapes in old windows.
Oh,
And the ultimate base for this word is late Latin quadrus, meaning square.
square again.
Yep. While it often refers to a diamond shape now, which is often derived from a square, the early sense was an unglazed floor tile, reinforcing that connection to a square or rectangular shape. A square, of course, has 4 sides, 4 corners.
So it's a geometric link back to 4 and squares.
Exactly. Even abstract shapes can trace back to this powerful number root.
Hmm.
Hashtag tag 3, hidden histories and unexpected turns.
Okay, we've seen words echoing sounds, words built on numbers. Now let's explore some real linguistic shapeshifters.
Ooh, the fun stuff.
Words with hidden histories, surprising semantic shifts, that's the term, right? When meaning changes over time.
That's the one. Semantic shift.
And meanings that have just faded or transformed dramatically. This is where language feels like a living archive full of twists. Let's start with quaint.
Ah, quaint.
Today it often means, charmingly old-fashioned, but I hear it started very differently.
It did. Quaint is a superb example of semantic shift. When it first appeared in Middle English, its original senses were quite different. It meant wise, clever, ingenious, or cunningly devised.
Wise and clever, that's totally different.
Totally. The core idea was showing skill, or being artfully made, implying sophistication, craftsmanship. It came from Old French quaint, from Latin cognitus, known or ascertained, related to knowing or skill.
So it was actually a real compliment back then. Something quaint was smart or well-made.
Precisely. Admiration for ingenuity. Later, it started to mean out of the ordinary, unusual.
Okay, a slight shift.
But here's the big twist. Its current use, from the late 18th century on, means interestingly unusual or old-fashioned. And crucially, that original appreciative sense, the cleverness, the skill has largely weakened.
Yeah, it doesn't really mean skillful anymore.
No, it's more nostalgic, sometimes even slightly dismissive. So a word that once praised ingenuity now often implies a charming but maybe slightly irrelevant oldness.
Wow, that's quite a journey. from cutting edge to old-fashioned charm.
It really is. It shows how cultures reevaluate things, sometimes romanticizing what's no longer new just because it's not new. A subtle shift in perception reflected right there in the language.
It's fascinating. What about queasy? That feels like it's always meant nauseous, right? Sick to your stomach.
Queasy, late Middle English. It's intriguing because its origin is a bit uncertain. Early spellings like queasy already meant causing nausea.
So pretty much the same?
Well, yes, but there's a nuance. There's a possibility it's related to Old French quasi, to hurt. But what's particularly noteworthy is that early English examples used queasy more broadly to mean unsettled or troubled, referring to a state of affairs, not just the stomach. Like a political situation could be called queasy.
Really? An unsettled situation.
Yeah. So while it definitely landed on its modern specific meaning of nauseous, it used to cover a more general sense of unease or disquiet. It broadened, then narrowed its focus. Words finding their niche over time.
Huh. Okay, now here's a word with perhaps one of the most complex and sensitive histories. Queer.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That one's definitely seen a lot of shifts and, well, controversy.
Navigating the history of queer, which popped up in the early 16th century, definitely requires careful attention. Its precise origin is doubtful, maybe German queer, oblique, perverse, but that's not certain.
Okay.
Its early senses in English were broadly eccentric, strange, maybe of questionable character, odd.
Just generally unusual.
Generally unusual, yeah. Then, from the late 18th century, it got associated with illness, like in feel queer, meaning feel unwell.
Right, I've heard that.
Then, as our sources note, the offensive association with homosexuality is recorded from late 19th century slang used derogatorily.
Okay.
And it's really crucial for us here in this deep dive to simply present these historical linguistic shifts as found in the sources. We're illustrating how language evolves and reflects, or can even be used to inflict, societal views.
Right, it's about tracing the word's path, not endorsing any viewpoint.
Exactly. Understanding the evolution, not the connotations themselves. It's a stark reminder of the power and responsibility in language.
A very important distinction. Now, speaking of words softening their impact, what about quell? Sounds strong, but I usually hear like quelling a riot or quelling fears, not actually killing.
That's because quell, an Old English word, originally did mean something much harsher.
Right.
Kill or slay.
Really? Kill.
Yep. Its Germanic origin links it to Dutch quellen and German quellen, meaning to torment or cause pain. Pretty brutal.
Wow.
But, as you said, an attenuated sense, a softened meaning of subdue, suppress, put down, arose in the early 16th century.
So it weakened over time.
It did. It's a common thing. Words for intense actions often soften, maybe reflecting societal shifts towards more nuanced or even euphemistic ways of describing control. From outright killing to merely subduing, the degree of force implied lessened considerably.
Language adapting to sensitivities, maybe? From lethal to inhibitory? That's a major shift.
It is quite a transformation.
What about quench? I think of quenching thirst, but also quenching a fire. Are those related?
They are, and it's a beautiful example of metaphorical extension. Quench, another Old English word. The root quenken in aquenken originally meant to put out or extinguish, primarily fire or light.
A literal putting out.
Very literal, physical action,
Yeah.
bringing something to an end. But then in Middle English, the sense satisfy, thirst, or desire popped up.
Ah, the metaphorical leap.
Exactly. A clear, elegant shift from a literal physical action extinguishing fire to a metaphorical satisfaction of a need. You're not literally putting out thirst like a fire, but you're making it cease, satisfying it.
That's a great example of metaphor just becoming part of everyday language.
Absolutely. Using familiar physical actions for abstract states.
I love how words pick up these new layers. Let's move to quilt. Seems straightforward, bed covering, cozy.
Well, mostly straightforward. Quilt commonly refers to that, yes. But its journey from Middle English is a bit more nuanced.
How so?
It came from Old French quilt, ultimately Latin culcita, which meant mattress or cushion.
A mattress, not a cover.
In Latin, yeah, something soft to lie on. But when the word was adopted into English and other languages, its main purpose shifted from something to lie on to something for covering. Specifically, a padded, stitched covering.
So the function changed as the word traveled.
It seems so. The basic idea of a soft layered item stayed, but its application shifted. And interestingly, our sources mention a related term, counterpane,
Counterpane, girl.
used for a quilted bed cover until the late 17th century. And counterpane itself was altered from medieval Latin culcita punta, meaning pricked mattress.
Pricked. As in sewn.
Exactly. Referring to the stitching that creates the quilted pattern. So the idea of a soft sewn item for comfort has been around a long time in this word family, with its purpose just subtly shifting.
That's a great example of function influencing meaning across languages. Let's talk about quit. Feels like it's always meant stop a job or give up.
Quit, Middle English,
Yeah.
has an interesting, quite profound evolution. Its earliest sense was actually set free or redeem.
Free.
Yeah, from Old French quieter, verb, and quite, adjective, from Latin quietus past participle of quiescere, to be still or at rest.
So related to quietness.
Exactly. The core meaning was about being at rest, freed from an obligation, a burden, a debt. To be quiet was to be clear or discharge.
Okay, so how did we get to stopping a job?
That common meaning, discontinue an activity like a job or habit, dates from the mid-17th century. It shows a transition from being passively freed from something to actively freeing oneself from an obligation or activity.
The agency shifted from relief to decision.
Precisely. A journey from passive relief to active cessation.
That makes sense. Being free from leading to stopping. And what about quite, as in quite good or quite hungry? That word can be a bit ambiguous.
Quite, also Middle English, derived from the obsolete adjective quite, a variant of quit. And early on, it carried a very strong sense. Completely, fully, just like being completely free or clear.
So quite good meant completely good.
Originally, yes.
Yeah.
Utterly good, no reservations. Here's the interesting shift. The notion of moderation, the sense fairly or somewhat like quite nice, meaning moderately nice, didn't really show up until the mid-19th century.
That recently. Wow.
Relatively speaking, yes.
Yeah.
For centuries, quite was an intensifier, absolutely. Only fairly recently did it soften its intensity to its more common, sometimes understated modern meaning.
Yeah.
Where it can mean anything from pretty to absolutely.
That's a huge shift in rhetorical force, from absolute to relative.
It really is.
And speaking of quit and quite, what about quit as in call it quits?
Quits, late 15th century, also links back to this family of being clear or free. Its first recorded sense, in Call It Quits, was freed from a liability or debt.
Settled up.
Exactly. It possibly originated as a colloquial abbreviation of medieval Latin quietus, which was used as a receipt literally from Latin quietus, quiet or settled.
So calling it quits means being clear, settled on a debt or obligation, ending something.
Precisely. Bringing an end to a dispute, a contest, a relationship. Back to that core idea of being free or clear, allowing for rest or finality, the moment of resolution.
These semantic shifts are just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But even more fascinating, I think, are words that sound exactly alike but have completely different, unrelated origins. We mentioned quack earlier, the duck sound. But there's another quack, right? The informal term for a dodgy doctor.
Yes, the charlatan.
They must be related, surely. Or is this another linguistic trick?
Not related at all. This is where language just loves to play games with us, offering these wonderful puzzles.
Okay, break it down.
The quack of a duck, as we said. Pure onomatopoeia. Imitative sound. The other quack, the informal term for a doctor, especially a fraudulent one, is an abbreviation of an earlier, more descriptive word. Quacksalver.
Quacksalver. Never heard that.
It comes from Dutch, probably from obsolete Dutch quacken, meaning to prattle or boast noisily, and salf or zalf, the Dutch word for salve.
So a quacksalver is someone who prattles about salves.
Exactly. Literally paints a picture of someone prattling about his remedies or salves to potential customers. A loud, boastful, often fraudulent peddler of medicine.
That's brilliant. What a difference.
Totally distinct lineages, one from animal sounds, the other describing a charlatan's sales pitch. A vivid illustration of how different roots can lead to the same sound.
A prattling salver. I love it. And earlier, we also touched on quail, the bird, versus quail, the verb, to shrink back. Can you just quickly reiterate how different those are? It's such a key point.
Absolutely worth repeating. It's a common confusion and a perfect homonym example. Quail, the verb meaning waste away, or more commonly now, shrink back in fear, lose heart, has an origin that is remarkably unknown.
Still unknown. Wow.
Still unknown. One of those linguistic mysteries, it just appeared. In stark contrast, quail, the bird, as we covered, its name likely imitates its call, coming via Old French and medieval Latin.
So identical sound and spelling, utterly unrelated origin.
Precisely. One's an unknown, the other's an echo of a bird call.
Language really throws curveballs, but maybe the ultimate example of this, for me anyway, is quarry.
Ah, the triple threat.
Exactly. Not one, not two, but three distinct meanings, and each one has a completely different origin story. It feels like finding three different treasures buried in the same spot.
You're absolutely right. Quarry is prime linguistic homonymy, intricate and surprising. A fantastic illustration of how English, through borrowing and separate development, creates identical sounding words with totally disparate family trees. Let's break them down.
Please do.
First, quarry. The place where stone is extracted, a stone pit.
Okay, the common one.
Came into Middle English from a variant of medieval Latin quaeria, from Old French quaerier, the ultimate base. Latin quadrum, a square.
A square. Why square?
Connecting to the shape of cut stone, the squared blocks extracted. So this quarry is rooted in geometry and stone masonry, where square stones are squared away.
Got it. Quarry number one. Square stones. What's number two?
Quarry, meaning a hunted animal or prey, the object of a hunt.
Okay, completely different.
Also Middle English, but a totally different path, from Old French query, which was an alteration influenced by coeur, leather, and cure, clean disembowel, of an earlier form, cure.
Okay, where's this going?
The Latin source for cure is cor, meaning heart.
Heart. How does heart relate to prey?
Originally, cure referred to the parts of a deer entrails, heart placed on the hide, and given as a reward to the hounds after a hunt.
No way. That's specific.
Specific. A remarkably vivid, slightly gruesome origin, rooted in medieval hunting rituals.
So the hunted quarry is metaphorically the heart of the hunt, the prize.
That is incredible. Okay, quarry 2. Deer's heart for hounds. What's the third one?
Quarry, as we touched on briefly, the diamond-shaped pane of glass or unglazed floor tile, mid-16th century.
Right, the window pane wall.
An alteration of Middle English quarrel, again, not the argument, the window pane word,
Right.
which was based on late Latin quadrus meaning square. Again,
Back to square?
back to square. The early sense was an unglazed floor tile, connecting directly to its square or diamond shape. Whether window or floor, it references a geometric shape.
Unbelievable. 3 words, identical sound and spelling, a square stone pit, a deer's heart for hounds, and a square window pane.
Isn't that amazing? Shows how unpredictable and multi-layered language is. Like it plays hide and seek, burying different stories under the same sound. This is exactly why we do these deep dives. Hashtag, tag, 5e quibbles, queries, and quixotic adventures. Okay, after sounds, numbers, hidden histories, let's explore a cluster of words about asking, seeking, and verbal artistry.
Ooh, the art of talking.
Yeah, whether it's a clever remark or a subtle objection. We're talking quibbles, queries, even quixotic adventures.
Yeah.
Let's start with query. Feels like a direct question, right?
Query, mid-17th century. It's a very direct import, almost a command. It's an anglicized form of the Latin imperative quere.
Query, meaning
Inquire or ask.
Mhm.
Comes straight from the Latin verb quere, to ask, seek. So when you query something, a database, a statement, you're literally saying seek or ask.
a command embedded in the language. Cool.
Keeps its original force.
And quest definitely sounds like it's in the same family, implying a search, often for something important.
Absolutely. Very close cousin.
Mm.
Quest, late Middle English. As a noun, it meant both inquest, a formal inquiry, and a search or expedition.
Okay.
As a verb, it often described a hound searching for game, tracking a scent. Both senses tied to seeking, actively pursuing something.
And the root.
Same as query. Latin quere, ask, seek. Shows their close kinship, both about active pursuit, knowledge, treasure, whatever.
And question clearly involves asking, but sometimes challenging too.
Question, also late Middle English, follows the same path. Noun from Old French question, verb from Old French questioner. Both rooted in Latin question, ultimately from querere, ask, seek.
All roads lead to query.
Pretty much for this group. The fundamental act of inquiring is right there. Interestingly, the sense of calling into question someone's ethics, challenging or doubting something.
Yeah, when did that start?
That dates specifically from the mid-17th century. Shows how to ask gained a more critical nuance over time.
And questionnaire comes from this too.
Yep, questionnaire.
Yeah.
Late 19th century adoption from French, from questioner, shows modern forms built on old foundations for new needs, like surveys.
Amazing how consistent that root is. Now let's get into the more playful or tricky words like quibble. That implies a minor objection, maybe some wordplay.
Quibble, early 17th century. Yes, it's all about wordplay and subtle distinctions initially. Its early sense was play on words or pun, a clever verbal trick.
A pun. Interesting.
It's considered a diminutive of an obsolete word, quib, meaning a petty objection or subtle evasion. But here's the really fascinating bit about its origin.
Go on.
Its likely source is the Latin word quibus,
Quibus. What's that?
It's a specific grammatical form, dative ablative plural, to for, by, with, from whom. It was used a lot in legal documents.
Ah, legal jargon.
Exactly. By means of which, with respect to which, used for fine distinctions, subtle clauses. Because it was so common in these formal, precise, sometimes convoluted legal texts, it got associated with subtle distinctions, verbal niceties, maybe deliberate obscurities.
So legal jargon influenced common speech.
It seems so. Bringing that sense of making fine, sometimes overly fine or irritating, distinctions, taking legal technicality into everyday chat, sometimes just to annoy.
That's brilliant. What about quirk? Similar feel something unusual, a peculiar habit.
Quirk, early 16th century. Actually started as a verb meaning move jerkily or twist subtly. Its origin, unknown, frustratingly.
Another unknown.
Yep. But its noun form, mid-16th century, initially meant a subtle verbal twist, or a quibble, linking right back to quibble. A clever turn of phrase, a verbal deflection.
So it started with words.
It seems so. Only later did it evolve into its current broader meaning. An unexpected twist of fate, or a peculiar habit or characteristic. That distinctive oddity. From verbal trickery to general oddness.
And quip sounds like it belongs right there too. A sharp, witty remark.
Quip, mid-16th century. Also fits this verbal artistry category. Possibly from Latin quip, indeed, or forsooth, suggests a conversational interjection.
Okay.
Originally, a quip was a sharp, pointed, maybe sarcastic remark made quickly. The idea of cleverness or wit as an admiring quality came later.
So it wasn't always funny.
Not necessarily. It shifted from being primarily biting or critical to potentially humorous or admirable in its sharp delivery.
Wow.
From a jab to a clever observation. Another word gaining positive connotations.
And then quote. Seems fundamental to writing, citing. What's its hidden history?
Quote, late Middle English. From medieval Latin quotare or quota. Its original sense was very technical. Mark a book with numbers or with marginal references.
Like indexing.
Exactly. A tool for cross-referencing, locating passages.
Right.
This technical use evolved to mean give a reference by page or chapter, which, by the late 16th century, led to our main meaning today. Cite a text or person's exact words.
From marking pages to citing words makes sense.
Yeah, essentially pointing to words. And a modern nuance, the informal phrase, quote, unquote.
Ah, yes, the verbal air quotes.
Exactly. Used since the 1930s, referring to someone else's words, sometimes specifically to show the speaker's dissociation from that opinion.
Right, like he said it was innovative, quote unquote.
Precisely. A very contemporary way of signaling distance. Shows how even basic words adapt to new communication needs.
That's a fascinating evolution from page marks to verbal distancing. Now, let's turn to words with really distinctive origin stories. An anecdote, maybe? Or a literary character, like quiz, as in to ask questions.
Quiz, the verb meaning ask questions or examine with questions. Emerged in U.S. English, mid-19th century.
Where from?
One possible origin is from an earlier, maybe dialect use of quiz, meaning look curiously at or examined with a quizzical expression. Maybe influenced by inquisitive. It sort of settled into its interrogative meaning over time.
But then there's the other quiz, isn't there? The one with the legendary origin story.
Yes, the practical joke one.
The Dublin theater proprietor, the bet, the nonsense word. That story is told so often it feels like it has to be true.
It's one of those linguistic myths that's just too good, too appealing, it refuses to die. The quiz, meaning practical joke or look of curiosity, late 18th century, is often said to have been invented by this Dublin theater guy, Richard Daly. The story goes, he bet he could make a nonsense word known citywide in 48 hours.
And he chalked quiz on walls overnight.
So the legend claims. And by morning, everyone was asking what it meant. He won the bet and supposedly created a new word. It's a wonderfully charming tale.
It really is. Linguistic pranksterism.
A testament to a good anecdote and our desire for neat origin stories. The idea that language can be shaped by one bold act.
So, is it true?
However, and this is crucial for our factual deep dive, our sources state unequivocally, there is no evidence to support this theory.
Ah, shame.
It's a great story, but it's a classic cautionary tale about linguistic myths. Entertaining, but not always factual. The true origin of this quiz remains obscure. Sometimes the mystery is part of the charm.
Always good to debunk a fun myth, even if it stings a bit. But here's a word whose origin story is definitely true, straight from literature. Quixotic.
Ah, Don Quixote.
That name alone sounds like it holds a grand tale.
Quixotic, late 18th century English. A superb example of literature directly shaping vocabulary, based entirely on Don Quixote, the hero of Cervantes' famous Spanish romance from the early 17th century.
And what does this character represent?
He's defined by his naive, unworldly idealism. An impractical idealist, often absurdly so, pursuing noble but unrealistic goals with unwavering, almost delusional conviction.
Like tilting at windmills.
Exactly. The classic idiom, tilting at windmills, captures it perfectly. From the episode where Quixote attacks windmills thinking they're giants.
So, quixotic means?
It evokes that character. Noble intentions, grand visions, but utterly impractical or idealistic actions detached from reality.
Yeah.
A powerful testament to literature becoming ingrained in our language.
Amazing how a fictional character becomes such a vivid descriptor. Okay, we've explored inquiry and verbal flair. Let's now revisit and dive deeper into words capturing fundamental states. Trembling, quietness, quickness. We touched on quiver, to tremble earlier.
The trembling one.
Let's just reinforce its deep connection to that rapid, subtle movement.
Absolutely. Quiver, the verb tremble, really strongly reinforces that link between the Q sound and quick trembling movement, as we noted from Old English quiver, nimble or quick. So the sound itself suggests that rapid, slight motion, a shiver, a leaf, an emotional tremor. Intrinsically linked to vitality, subtle agitation, maybe an inability to be still, it captures a nuanced type of movement.
And that leads perfectly into quick. Feels so fundamental speed, motion, but what are its deeper roots? It implies more than just fast, doesn't it?
Quick is truly fascinating. A remarkably rich word from its earliest days, way beyond just speed. In Old English, quick or quiku originally meant alive, animated, alert.
Alive, like the quick and the dead.
Exactly that phrase. From the King James Bible, meaning the living and the deceased. It has deep Germanic origins, related to Dutch, quiek, lively, German kek.
Wow.
All from an ancient Indo-European root shared with Latin vivus, alive, Greek bios, zoe, life. So at its core, quick implies vitality, animation, life itself.
That's incredible depth.
And what's remarkable is that the sense mentally agile, quick at maths, quick wit was already present in Old English.
Mental quickness, too.
Yeah.
From the start.
From the very start. It encompassed physical speed and mental acuity. A word rich in meaning from its earliest days, connecting life, movement, and intellect.
So much packed into such a simple word. Okay, if quick is about animation, life, agility, what about the opposite? Stillness, repose.
For stillness, we look to quiet, Middle English. Originally a noun meaning peace, as opposed to war or disturbance, a cessation of turmoil.
Where did it come from?
Via Old French, ultimately from Latin quies, quiet, meaning repose or quiet. So the fundamental idea of peace, tranquility, stopping activity has been central for centuries. Calm, respite from noise or motion.
And quiescent must be related. Sounds very similar.
It is indeed a direct, maybe more academic relative. Quiescent, mid-17th century, connects directly back to the same Latin base, quiescer, to be still or at rest.
So similar meaning to quiet.
Similar, but quiescent often implies a more prolonged or inherent state of inactivity, like a quiescent volcano that hasn't erupted for ages, while quiet might be temporary.
Ah, okay. A subtle difference.
But both reinforce that deep root of tranquility, inactivity, drawing from the same wellspring of meaning being at rest, free from disturbance. Hashtag tag C6. Acronyms, people, and modern inventions.
It's amazing seeing these ancient roots still so active today, but language isn't just ancient history, it's always evolving, creating new words.
Constantly.
So let's look at some modern formations, acronyms, words from people's names, other less obvious or more global origins. Let's start with a modern bureaucratic term that became quite common. Quango.
Quango, relatively modern, yes.
Yeah.
1970s, originally U.S. English. A classic acronym.
Right, word from initial letters. What does it stand for?
Quasi, or quasi-autonomous, non-government organization.
Okay, so bodies that do public stuff but aren't quite government departments.
Exactly. It perfectly shows how new words emerge from bureaucracy, the need for shorthand, especially in politics and admin, a very contemporary way language expands.
And quasi itself, we see that elsewhere. What does it mean?
Quasi is older, late 15th century English. Direct use of a Latin word meaning literally as if or almost.
As if, almost.
Yeah. So in Quango, it signifies something that is almost non-governmental or functions as if it were, implying some independence but still linked to government. It provides that crucial nuance.
A linguistic shorthand? Fascinating. But maybe even more impactful are words from a person's name, especially when their actions change language itself. And for that, we have Quisling.
Ah, Quisling. Yes, that carries real historical weight.
A powerful and, well, dark origin, right?
Extremely dark. The word gained prominence during World War II. It means a traitor cooperating with an enemy, a collaborator.
And it comes from?
Directly from the name of Major Vidkun Quisling, Norwegian army officer and politician, 1887-1945.
What did he do?
During WWII, he effectively ruled Norway on behalf of the occupying German forces. He actively encouraged non-resistance against the Nazis, became the very symbol of a national traitor.
And what happened to him?
Arrested and executed for treason after the war. His name becoming a common noun, a generic term for collaborator, is a rare and striking thing.
A proper noun becoming common due to infamous actions.
Exactly. Shows how one person's deeds can leave an indelible mark on the lexicon, becoming synonymous with a profound negative concept, a chilling intersection of history and language. Again, we just report the origin impartially here.
Understood. A profound example. Now let's explore some words with less obvious, maybe mysterious origins, or showing global connections. Like quid for a pound sterling. Very British slang.
Quid, informal, late 17th century, originally denoted a sovereign, an old gold coin. What's intriguing is that its origin remains obscure.
Really? We just don't know.
We just don't know for sure. Perfect example that not all words have clear lineages back to Latin or onomatopoeia. Sometimes words just emerge, maybe from forgotten slang, and the source is lost, adds a touch of mystery.
The mystery is part of the fun. What about quiff, the hairstyle? Very specific word.
Quiff, late 19th century, also unknown origin, like quid, originally described a lock of hair plastered down on the forehead. Apparently popular with soldiers, maybe to keep hair tidy.
Plastered down. I think of it brushed up now.
Exactly. While the origin is obscure, the word has evolved slightly in application. Now, it more commonly refers to hair brushed upwards and backwards from the forehead. Shows how words adapt based on changing fashion.
And quay, where ships dock. Sounds French, but the spelling is different from quay.
Quay. Middle English. Interesting because its early spelling was quay.
Was it?
Yep, from Old French quai, which was actually of Celtic origin, predating a lot of the Latin influence.
Celtic. Okay, so why the quay spelling now?
That spelling change happened late 17th century, directly influenced by the modern French spelling K.
Ah, French influence again?
Demonstrates cross-linguistic interactions. Even if a word's been in English for ages, influence from a prestige language like French can prompt a spelling change to align with its perceived origin, even if pronunciation stays the same. Dynamic interplay.
And quartz. Sound like a very solid, strong word. Where does that come from?
Quartz. Mid-18th century, the hard mineral silica, traces its origin from German quartz.
German, okay.
Which likely came from Polish dialect, kwarty, corresponding to Czech tidi verdi, both meaning hard.
Hard. So the meaning traveled with the word across borders.
Exactly. A wonderful example of words crossing linguistic borders, reflecting material properties, adopted maybe through trade or science. The sound quartz almost evokes that hardness, doesn't it?
It really does. Finally, let's wrap this section with quotient, the math term from division. Seems straightforward, but is there a linguistic quirk? Maybe the spelling.
Indeed, there is a distinct quirk with quotient, late Middle English term, for the result of dividing one quantity by another.
From Latin.
From Latin quotients. How many times?
Oh.
From quote, how many? Meaning is clear.
Yeah.
How many times does one number go into another?
Just the quirk.
The spelling. The final ent. According to our sources, it's due to a confused association with participial forms ending in ens, ents.
A confused association, like a mistake.
Almost. It illustrates that linguistic evolution isn't always perfectly logical. Sometimes a word's form gets influenced by an accidental association, a mix-up with other patterns, a reminder of the irregular, charmingly imperfect nature of language development, even in precise fields like math.
That's amazing. Even in math, language can take a detour, like finding little linguistic fossils showing the winding paths words took, hashtag, tag, outro. Wow, what an incredible journey we've just taken through the world of clue words.
It really covered a lot of ground, didn't it?
From the direct imitation of a duck's quack to the complex literary roots of quixotic, from the numerical precision of quadrangle to the surprising semantic shifts of quaint. We've uncovered this amazing treasure trove, unexpected origins, fascinating transformations, just a sheer variety of stories in one small, quirky corner of English.
Yeah.
It really reinforces that idea of language as a living, breathing archive of human experience, always changing, reflecting history, even playing tricks on us with those homonyms.
It absolutely does. And the main takeaway here, I think, is that understanding word origins isn't just trivia, though it is fun.
Definitely fun.
It deepens our appreciation for language itself. It reveals these intricate historical, cultural connections under our everyday communication.
Right.
And it enhances our critical thinking, helping us understand how meaning is constructed, how it shifts and it evolves, reminding us words aren't static definitions, but dynamic things with rich histories.
Well said.
This kind of knowledge is really most valuable when it's understood and applied, helping make sense of the world, fostering a deeper understanding of how we speak and think.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you, our listeners, feel a little bit more well-informed and maybe a lot more curious about the words you use every day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the enchanting world of quo words. Keep exploring.
And maybe as you go about your day, now that you've heard how words like quaint or that triple quarry evolved so dramatically, how does understanding a word's past change how you use it or perceive it today? What other words might be hiding similar surprising stories, just waiting for you to unearth them in your own linguistic adventures?